We're going to record. And for those who are, well, Chodesh Tov, for those who are celebrating Happy Thanksgiving. But we're going to start with this chart. So I'm actually going to share my screen if people don't mind, so we can fill this out together. And Yavni always reminds me to blow things up a little bit when I share my screen. So I will do that. So here's what I thought we would. There you go. All right. So I thought we would do. Atzamot Shel Heter. If I remember correctly, we'll have to go back through it. I think almost everyone thinks that they are. No, I don't think anyone thinks they're neutral, right? But maybe we'll find that somebody does. But what we're actually looking is like, how is it mitzdaref? Is it mitzdaref here with the isur, with mitzdaref with the heter, or is it neutral? Or we'll see. Right, of course, there are other things of like, well, maybe the moach is mitzdaref with the isur, or maybe if the bones are soft, right, or wet, or moist, or whatever the word is, right? So let's go through these different things, and I'll point us to some sources here, hopefully, or maybe you guys will remember it better than me. So we're in Sadi Tet in your idea. And I actually found I think the Bach in some ways is a better summary than the Beit Yosef is on these topics, especially the beginning of the Bach. So I thought we would start there. And just to remind us, right, the tour itself, which we won't read inside necessarily, has two opinions, right? He has the Yesh Yomrim opinion, which is that the Atzamot Isur go with the Isur, and the Atzamot of the Heter go with the Heter. All right, we're not gonna. I don't want to call it the Yesh Yomrim though, because we're actually going to get a name with that opinion eventually. But I wanted to start with Rabbeinu Yerucham, which, if you guys turn to the Bach, is in that first Bach before his V'yesh L'Hakshot. It's like a couple lines before, and we can. If people can give me a thumbs up if you see it, maybe.
Yeah.
He says Rav Rabbeinu Yerucham Katav. Sfara Revi'it. So we'll start with that maybe. Maybe even all, people see it. Is that right? And so what does he say? Just give me. We don't have to read it inside. What does he say?
So you're saying the beginning of the Bach?
Yeah, it's the beginning of the Bach, but it's
not really.
It's kind of at the beginning. I have at some point in the middle of it, it says V'yesh L'Hakshot L'Didan, right? If I go up from there by a couple of lines, if that's hard, you know what?
Go ahead.
Alice, do you have it?
I don't know. Do you mean this? Yes. Okay, that's it. What's the Rashi Tevot? Al Shem.
Al Shem Harav Rabbeinu Avraham ben Asmel.
Right? Okay. Rabbeinu Avraham ben Asmel. ואפילו עצמות התר אין לצרף להתר, אלא במין במינו, ולא במין בשאינו מינו. Okay, and you wanted to ויש להקשות. Okay. ויש להקשות לדידן דקיים.
No, I wanted to stop there. That's exactly
okay, good. Okay. So did you join the Atmod Shel Heter? You don't add to the Heter only in the case when it's min bemino.
Exactly.
So there you add it. Like
yeah. So this is actually my reason for this column over here, right? Is that even the Atzamot Shel Heter are only mitzdarfim for the Heter in min bemino. Right? Obviously, they're not mitzdarfim with the Isur, right? But they're kind of neutral unless it's min bemino. And this is what Lexi and I were actually arguing about in class. But if you look in the Rabbeinu Yerucham, he actually says that the Atzamot Shel Isur are mitzdarfim the Isur, right? So, and that's why he has that afilu in there. But everyone agree with me there? That's okay, good. That's one. Okay, so Rabbeinu Shimshon is the next one I wanted to do, the great Tosafos. Oh, yes, Isaac. Sorry, and Alana is also just joining. What we're doing is this, I'm sharing the screen here. I made this chart to try and figure out the different opinions. And for the moment, we're working off the Bach on the tour, the beginning of the Bach, because I actually feel the Bach is really the best summary of, no offense to the Beit Yosef, the Bach is the best summary of the different opinions here, at least in terms of Rishonim. So we'll work off him for the moment. But good. Let's so Rabbeinu Shimshon, I found his opinion. If you guys look in the Bach, it's a few lines down in my copy. For Rabbeinu Shimshon nismach. So maybe somebody tell me what that. Maybe somebody
at the top. You mean above what we just read?
Yeah, above what we just read. What did I say at the bottom?
I don't remember, but yeah.
Yeah. It's
three lines down. You said, but you meant from the top.
Three lines down from the top of the Bach, from the very top of the Bach here on the Siman. I'll get better at this, I promise. So, someone want to read that maybe, and then we can maybe fill it in. Jake, please go for it.
Yeah. Rabbeinu Shimshon nismach al Yerushalmi per kama de arla, the kamrinan de af klipe isor matlin et isor.
Go a little bit more, just a little bit more.
The Talmuda didan lo nakat zara misla el simana ba'alma de smachtahi.
Great. So he throws out the B'tzorah B'Shela, which we haven't talked about this yet, but it really becomes our case of the bones of the Isur being mitzdarfim with the Isur. And he relies on Orla, on the Yerushalmi and Orla, that even the Klipe Isur malinata Isur. So what does he mean there? How would we rule Ad Samot Shel Isur according to the Rabbi Shimshon?
Stuffing your head there.
Yeah, mitzdarfim ima heter, right? Malin, this actually got slipped in class a little bit, right? Malin means to count against, to remove the Isur, right? Ima heter, right? And then obviously Atzamot Shel Heter is mitzdarfim ima heter, which will probably I think all the rest of them from here are going to be that way. I guess
you want a 9, yeah.
Yes. You guys can make fun of me for that one. That's a major faux pas right there. I'm one of those people who doesn't pronounce his words properly, clearly. But all right, that's him. How about the Ran? The Ran's the next piece in the Bach. So maybe someone want to read the next piece for Haran?
Haran katav Yerushalmi meirei v'atzamot ve'uklifot v'reshim v'talmudad din eirei v'atzmaot. I'm going to stop
it. That's all the Ran. The Isur v'heter is the next work we've got here. So what's the Ran's opinion?
So he's bringing Yerushalmi, which talks specifically about dry bones. But we're talking about the wet bones, right? Is our issue, because those can have like absorbed flavor or let out flavor. And so it's actually not clear to me exactly what he means for the Ran. If the Ran is saying like the Torah agrees, but only in the case of dry bones, or if the Torah agrees only in the case of wet bones.
But I think he's saying, well, I think he's trying to deal with the difference between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. He's saying the Yerushalmi, which says that they count for the heter is only if they're dry, and the Bavli, which seems to think that they count for the Isur is only if they're wet, right? So I think maybe what I wrote here works, right? People can tell me if they agree with what I wrote in the chart. Yavni's with me that, right? Mitzdarfim ima heter im yaveshim, mitzdarfim ima isur im lachim, right? So, okay, good. That's the Ran. Nice reading there, Isaac. Thank you. Somebody else want to pick up the Isur v'heter as the next person. You can see my chart is kind of based off the Bach's order here at this point. So, but someone want to read the next piece?
I mean, I can do it. Okay. ובאיסור והתר הארוך כתב דעת יש אומרים על שם אור זרוע, וכתב אף אחד אגב דעצמות היבשים אינם בר אכילה, מכל מקום הבישול מוציא מהם לחלוכית וטעם. עד כאן לשונו.
Good. So he's being a little cryptic here. You kind of have to know the Torah, but explain what.
So based on so Isur v'heter Ha'aro wrote in the name of Or Zarua that in spite of the fact that the dry bones are not edible, in any case if we cook them, so the lachluchi, some kind of like the ta'am, that's the most important thing, comes out anyway. Like it's like tea-bag, I don't know, like something like.
Actually, I'll put it this way. Yeah, Bishul, what does it do? How does he use it? He draws out the tam. Is he Moshech tam? No.
מוציא מהם לחלוכית
Yeah.
וטעם.
Let's see.
Right.
Lachluchit betam. I really like that. And we're going to assume that he thinks the same thing for Atzamot Shater. We don't know. I mean, it does. The Yeshomrim in the tour, right? Which is really, this is the thing. The Yeshomrim is the Or Zarua. Is he thinks that the Atzamot Shater means Terfim Ima Heter, but that essentially once it's a hot interaction with Atzamot Shalisur, they become Isur essentially. So good. Have I written anything wrong yet so far? Okay, good. Jacob, did you have a hand up that I saw? No, okay. All right, good. Let's do one more from him. Let's do the, he's got the Hagot Shari Dura. Who wants to read that part? Mihu Behagot Shari Dura. Maybe I'll read. My turn.
I don't mind reading, but I don't. I think
you do such a nice job. But
can switch, like whatever.
We'll pass it around. I'll do some more reading. Mihu behagot b'sharei duri said siman mem b'siman nun hey katav al shem ha'or zarua b'signon acharei. It's like also the or zarua, but a different version here. V'zeh l'shono atzamot shel isur einan mitzarfot l'isur aval atzamot shel heter mitzarfot leheter. Aval in mitzarf atzamot shel isur ima heter levatel isur. Right? Ve'im shum adam yatir. This is where it gets complicated. Yatir zeh lo avar al divrei chachamim. Aval inachon leyatir kulei hai. Or he quotes the Orzara, right? And ufi zeh im naflu atzamot shel isur below basar basar nevela toch kedera shel heter ein tzarich shishim levatlan. So he essentially, I think he's saying that they're neutral, they're parv, essentially, except if you treat them as if they're part of the heter, you're fine, right? You just shouldn't do it. So maybe something like that. I want to use the word parv because why not? I mean, it's the word, by the way, and this is actually something, I don't know if anyone will notice as we go through this, the word parv does not exist for any of these people as a halachic category, as a isur v'heter halachic category, right? They'll talk about things that are neither basar nor chalav. I don't think, maybe you pay attention all year, you might catch me that I'm wrong, but I don't think anyone will use the word parv.
When does that arise, that word?
I think, isn't it? It's not a Yiddish word originally?
That's what I always thought, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a Yiddish word. But then you might think they still might use it, right? They do use Yiddish and German and
Spanish.
Starfim. Let's see if this will be a good summary. Starfim, Imaheter. How's he put it? He has some really good language there. Right, yeah. This is right. I think Alana, I think you call this out as right. Halacha ve'emorin ken kind of case, if I remember correctly. Right, which we see all over the Gemara and in the poskim, right? It's like, yeah, this is the halacha, but we don't really want to let people know that you can do this. So I love the language of right of really kind of the emotional instinct in halacha sometimes of like, I just don't know if I'm willing to go that far. It's even though I know like it's technically fine, and it also might have a little bit in the background there of what Rav Landis often likes to refer to as social policy, right? That halacha has both like, the strict deen that you get from doing things, and also sometimes you make rules based on trying to for social reasons, either because you want your society to go a particular way or you're afraid of people being too lenient or whatever it may be, and that's social policy. And Rav Landis, I know, is very to him it's very important of kind of making that distinction as a posek in order to be able to determine what you have to cling to and what is there for other reasons. So Okay, good. That's the Hagot Cherry Door. How are we feeling about this? This is hopefully a good use of your time just to go over these different opinions.
Yeah, sure.
Good. I wanted to look at the tour now. I think from what way I'm reading the tour, his lefichach is when he really starts his opinion, which shocking, is really seems to be really based on his father in many ways. So maybe it's in Tour Aleph. It's like the second half of Aleph. He starts lefichach, habalevatel, isur shenafalek deira. Someone want to read that? Ilana, please.
Okay. לפיכך, הבא לבטל איסור שנפל לקדרה, יצרף כל מה שבקדרה בין רוטב ובשר וכיפה ועצמות, ואפילו העצמות של האיסור, ואם יש בין הכל 60, מותר. אבל המוח שבעצמות האיסור מצטרף עם האיסור לאסור. And I guess that's enough for now.
Exactly. That's exactly what I wanted. So I'd say maybe something like, Meetstar, I can't type right now. Meetstar Fim HaHeter, Aval Lo Moach. Moach Hatzamot. Something like that. And I would actually maybe include, Moach Meetstar F. If I can type. Im HaIsur, right? So that's an incredibly hard calculation, by the way, to do, I imagine, right? Like, well, how much marrow is there in this thing? On the other hand, right, that also would get if you had dry bones, which many people, we already saw that opinion in the Hagot Sharai Dura, right? If you had completely dried out bones, they're at the worst, they're neutral. You wouldn't need to be like, if you drop them into your soup, you don't need to be mifatel them, right? And probably at best they are helping with at least according to the tour, they would help against the isur. So, or as my ninth grade halacha and Gemara teacher Rabbi Shmuel Brownstein put it to us, he said you can take a dried out pig bone and stir your soup. So it's potentially even lechatchila, right? That is, and if you think I'm crazy, everybody who uses bone china, like it is, bone is actually a very common kli, even in their world. So, but which is what leads, I believe, the Shah to essentially say that in this whole debate. Good. Oh, someone put something in the chat. What did? Can I see the chat? I can't see the chat while I'm sharing for some reason. Someone tell me was something good in the chat that I should know? No?
Yeah, it looks like that it's right. Like Isaac can say that he wrote it.
I grabbed my Yiddish dictionary, and at least Weinreich, who is known to have some philological issues, so put a stick on everything, says that parv is a Yiddish word not derived from Hebrew.
Okay, yeah, good. So that would be why, right? It doesn't show up in any halachic sources. With the other thing I wanted to look at, of course, was the opinion of the Bach, who at the very bottom of that first Bach, I think this is his opinion. He says, Ulafi aniot dati nir'eh. So maybe someone want to read that. My version has a nice little finger pointing to it at that point in the Bach. I don't know if this is the Shirat Devorah version. It's kind of like, look here, here's the bottom line. So
I'll read.
Go for it, Jacob.
Luffy and the dati nira deis lahachmir batzmot harakin shel isor litzdarfan im ha'isor.
Yeah, but I think that's all you need.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, keep going. V'imit bashel. You can skip a little bit. V'imit bashel etzem bechalavo etzem shel trefa betavshil basar.
Oh, b'basar. Nira im nityavesh ha'etzem have ke'etz ba'ama v'im yesh balach luchit as tzarich shishim. So.
Yeah.
Oh.
So okay. If they're rakin, then they're mitzrafin. Sorry, I'm using
im ha'isor.
Yeah, im ha'isor. Not 100% clear what he thinks if they're yavashim. Are they just neutral, or do they actually?
Yeah.
So maybe we'll just leave it at that, and not determine anything more from the Bach. So. Unless I have to, I did go through the whole Bach a few times, but I can't remember if he says like when he says it's like eights. What does that mean? Does it eights?
Yeah. He's quoting the Argo Sharidua there, FYI.
He is, yes. So you think it'd be the same as what we had before? That it'd be, but that it actually is parva in general. If it's Yavesh, maybe. So, well, maybe I'll put that it's may I go to Shari Dura, right? Just to help us out there. He's quoting it actually. I don't think he is actually. He says v'hacha ita behagot b'shari dura. You're right. So he says it's similar, but he earlier, just before this, he quoted the hagat shari dura.
In my edition, and then it says v'zel shono v'zal v'im.
You're right.
I think he's just quoting a different part. Yeah.
I
think he's quoting because he agrees with it at the end. Like he's quoting at the end because he agrees with it. Yeah.
So we can assume maybe it matches the Hagot Shari Dura from before that was quoted in the Bach itself. So great. Okay, good. So that's all of the Rishonim. Let's go to the Shulchan Aruch now and see. But how are we doing on time? Oh, good. I thought this would take maybe a little bit more in the first half of Chazarah, and look at that. So Sadi Tet. Let's start with the Shulchan Aruch. Maybe, and I wanted to read Aleph anyway, so let's read the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. Someone want to read?
I can read.
Alice, please.
Okay. חתיכת נבלה שיש בה בשר ועצמות שנפלה לכדי ההיתר, עצמות האיסור מצטרפים עם ההיתר לבטל האיסור. ואין צריך לומר שעצמות ההיתר מצטרפים עם ההיתר. אבל המוח שבעצמות איסור מצטרף עם האיסור. וגוף הגדירה אינה מצטרפת לא עם האיסור ולא עם ההיתר. Going to Aga, the Rama.
Exactly. Well, let's actually fill out the Shulchan Aruch then. Let's start with him, right? Can we just? Would you guys?
Okay. Yeah. It's right. So Atmodism is heter, right? So everything adds up to the heter. The Atmod, the Isur are adding to the heter. So that's the Rabbeinu Shimshon's opinion.
He does have the same caveat as the Tur, right? Moach mitzaref imais.
Right, and what Tur says, the Gdeira, right? It's also in the Tur, right? The Gdeira.
It is. He is. I think if people will agree with me, he's exactly the Tur's opinion. I think, right? So I know I'm very shorthand to write Kamol HaTur, but we'll leave it at that for the moment. Good. Now let's do the Ramah, because he's a little bit different. Keep going on, Alish.
ויש מחמירים שלא לצרף עצמות האיסור עם ההיתר לבטל, ובמקום הפסד יש לסמוך המכירים ומתירים, כי כן עיקר.
Right.
So there are those who are more stringent and don't add the עצמות האיסור to the heter. But you can do it if it's a case of hefsed, so one can rely on the Meklin because that's the ikar. Right, we had that opinion already quoted in Bach, but who was he quoting exactly? I don't remember in whose name was it, but exactly the same phrase.
I think it's kind of the Hagot Shari Dura is what he's actually.
Might be.
And mine actually just say mine says Hagaha Echat B'Shari Dura B'Shem or Zarua in my.
Oh, right, I have it too in the brackets.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think he's kind of filling the position of the Hagot Shari Dura, and but he says. And I think I don't know if this is actually in the Hagat Shari Dura that he's quoting, but we hadn't seen this up till now. Makom have said you should rely on the legal case, right? Which is a very Ramah thing, I think, in my experience to say of like, we practice this way, but because the Ikar Hadin is something else, that if when push comes to shove, you can rely on the Makilin case or the Makilin opinion, the Makil opinion. If you're going to lose money or whatever Makom have said might be, right? It could be all sorts of potential things.
Which is a little disappointing because he's still being machmir, like only in such case.
I think it's an interesting thing. It's disappointing to me. I'll just give my own personal opinion about it. But I also love that the Ramah is able to do two things at the same time. He holds on to his tradition, his line, but he's also aware that when his line is not such a strong position, that we should hold to it with no regard to like what the actual condition is around it.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. So that's why to me, that's what makes the Ramah so lovely. It's but I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, so maybe I'm completely biased. I don't know. So, but okay, we've got two more positions to do, the Shach and the Taz. Not to say that these are the only positions in the world here. Maybe did I have the Shach here first or the Taz first? I had the Shach first on this thing, so maybe we'll read the Shach, and then I have a part of the Taz we're going to read as well. So somebody want to read the Shach Tzadi Tet Sif Katan Aleph Atamot Yisur V'chule. Yavni, go for it.
עצמות האיסור וכולי, ולפי עונייתי בש"ס וירושלמי כדעת הרעה בספר בדק הבית, והר"ן פרק גדעונשה, העצמות הרכות מצטרפים לאיסור מפני מוח שבהם, ומחמת רכותן שיצא לחוט, אבל עצמות יבשים או קליפות של ביצים וקהי גבנה, אף אותן של איסור מצטרפים לבטל האיסור, וכן דעת האיסור ויתר, כלל בשם האור זרוע, וכן דעת הבח.
Yeah, so it's kind of, we call it Kamo Haran, since he says it is the Ran's opinion, and it does seem to match up with what the Ran says here, right? Oh, wait, no, it wasn't
Not the Ran.
Yeah.
He didn't quote it.
He did quote the Ran.
The Bach.
You think it's the Bach? Rakim, you're right. It is the Bach, Kamo HaBach. Thank you. Yeah, I think you're right. Not Kamo, even though he quotes the Ran and the Ra, but you're right. He really is like the Bach. Yeah.
Although we didn't put the Bach as being explicit about if they're dry.
Yeah.
But I think, like he said, Etzba Alma, you said you weren't sure what that means, but at least the Shach thinks it means that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I might think he's like the Ran, because the Bach thought. Oh, yeah, you're right. It is the Bach. It is the Bach.
No, he says that. Well, he says that they're like mitztofim laheter if they're dry.
Yes.
Right?
So maybe I'm going to put it up. Let's. And isn't that the Ran, right? The Ran says mitztofim laheter. Yeah. So let's call it. I'll say the Ran, just as more explicit. Unless somebody tells me I'm completely wrong here, and then I will agree with you.
I don't think I remember the language of Atzmod Harakin from Ran, right? It was really Bach in the end, but did he quote?
Let's take a look. Let's take a look back for a moment in the Bach here. Yeah, great. V'haran katav Yerushalmi Mayre, right? The Yerushalmi, which says that they combine with or really the shells there, or the klipot combine with the heter. Mayre be'atzmot v'ku klipot yeveshim v'talmud didan ayre be'atzmot talachim. Right. So I think the Ran seems to have that opinion that it depends if they are lach or yavesh.
Yeah, the lachut. Yes. Right. I meant the atzamot harakin because I still there's a difference, right? Isn't there?
Yeah, I was thinking about this a little bit of like what we haven't done, right, is try to distinguish which atzamot are which, right? Like, how do you know? Does it have to be dried out? Is it maybe certain types of animals or something like that? I mean, like, for instance, like I was thinking about fish bones, right? Fish, if it's a Isur fish, the fish bones. Fish bones are pretty. Do fish have marrow in the bones the same way that we do? I don't know. I'm an ignoramus about biology. I have to be honest with people. So, but someone will go look up. Isaac, what do you have?
I don't think they have marrow in the same way. I think they just go kind of all gelatinous.
Great. Although no one, and I made this a good point to say the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch talk about marrow. But some of these other opinions that talk about soft bones or wet bones don't mention marrow in particular. They just mention bones that are wet, right? That could be different. I'm not sure, right? They haven't especially called out moach, which by the way, again, we're also assuming moach means marrow. I don't know. Like I think so, but I don't know for sure. How the Torah meant it. So okay, one more opinion here, and then we will be done with this chart. Which I feeling pretty accomplished about this chart. It's Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for this chart. The Taz. I'll read the Taz. The Taz, for me, I think there are different editions you have out there. It starts in the first wide lines in the Taz. This is in Taz Sif Katan Aleph Atzamot Yisur Mistarfim. It's what Arma starts says Va'ani Omer Moshe Emet V'Torato Emet, which is like such a great place to start. Like really, we should just start everything with that. But it's amazing Taz. Just people give me a thumbs up when you see where I am in the Taz. It's towards the end, I'd say. Yeah. Alice and Ilana.
You said Aleph. It's Aleph in the
Aleph in the Taz. Sif Katan Aleph in Tzaditet.
You can read it. I'll just find it.
I'll read slowly, and maybe I'll help. He says, "Vani Omer Moshe Emet V'Torato Emet De Etzem Ze Domem Mamash Lichli De Amrinan Be Besiman Tzadichet Seif Hey De Lo Amrinan Be Chaticha Atzma Nase Nevela Imhu Matechot L'Divrei Mordechai Kivan Yesh Lo Heter Bahagala." Hachinami hai etzem deshar lehafrid hanivla bo achshav al yedei bishul im basar shelav behagala dehakaimalan beorchaim. This is actually Hilchot Pesach. Dekli etzem nitarim behagala ve'al ken lo sheach kan chatichat zman sevelav hu mitzdaref im haheter. Right, that's his final thing. His bottom line there. But this is his whole thing. He's like. And I actually really just the thing I love about this Taz is he's just like, what's the whole thing about bones? It's a kli. And even if it does have Isur in it, who cares? Right? Because it's possible to separate it out. You can fix it, you can do Haggalah, unlike food, right? Where food you can't, even maybe there's a Shalosh Sochto, but it's not so easy, even if you assume that there is a Shalosh Sochto. Everyone agrees that with Kalim you can fix them, except for Cheres, which is not the case. And he's like, therefore, it's Mitzdarefim Hayater. So Mitzdarfim im haheter, and we can assume, of course, about him. If anyone doesn't say anything, I'm just assuming that they assume that the Atzamot Shel Hater also Mitzdarfim. And so, really, aside from Rabbeinu Yerocham, everyone agrees about that part. So, okay. Any final thoughts about this chart before we give it up? And all right, I hope this was helpful. This was, very much an exercise of some of the more classical ways of learning Isser V'Heter, of like knowing all the different opinions about everything and seeing where they play out. And you can also maybe go through this chart and see, where does the halacha start to point over time? The other thing that I do love about this is really a case that even though both Talmuds have something to say about it, and maybe because the two Talmuds have something to say about it that seem to be just different from each other, it's like every possible opinion out there pretty much exists. Not quite everyone, but it's a pretty broad spectrum of opinions that exist out there. And also the amazing ability of Rishonim to be like, it doesn't matter that the Bavli seems to really think that bones are mitzdarefim im Yisur. We have really easy ways to push that off. Right? Like, it's machta be'alma, it's not a real simana, it's only in some bones. It's really an amazing thing. Okay. Good.
I just had one question about, like, do I understand it correctly that we kind of assume that when the Yerushalmi says that the Klipei Asur, Ma'alin Heda Isur, that automatically the same is with Heter? That's the opinion of it.
Yeah, I mean, I assume so, right? If you're gonna, it's kind of a kal v'chomer there, or al chad kama v'chama. If the bones of the Isur are mitzdarfim, then come on, the bones of the Heter have to be mitzdarfim.
But everybody assumes so, that it's in the Yerushalmi, so probably.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Yerushalmi doesn't seem to be talking about bones there. It's a conclusion of the Ran, among other people. I think it was the Ran, right? That the Yerushalmi's case of klipot can be extended to bones. Okay. With that, I do have a few other things I wanted to do with us today. I have to course, my screen was in full screen, so I got to get out of there so I can see what I actually want to do. All right, let's. There's one Ber Hetev that I wanted to read on Sif Katan Gimel, at least according to my notes. So this is the Yesh Machmirim in the Ramah, or the Ramah says that we are stringent. So I think it's worth reading this actually. So maybe someone want to read Ber Hetev Gimel? It's pretty short. Machmirim. Yavni, please.
ומכל מקום גם לאיסור אין מצטרפים, אבל עצמות ההיתר מצטרפים להיתר. שח.
Great.
No, sorry. Yeah.
Shach. Mm-hmm.
So wait, so the Yesh Machmirim that not to count the bones of Isur in the Heter, but you definitely don't have to count them with the Isur, and the bones of the Heter definitely count with the Heter.
Exactly. Great. And this, by the way, and I was looking back on our chart to make sure we did this right. We did leave it vague in the Ramah. Just we said that they're not mitztarfim imahis. That we don't mitztaref imaha. They're not mitztarfim with the heter, and not what they actually do with the isor or not. So it's a good clarification that at the end of the day, the two major poskim on the page, the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, neither of them thinks that the bones of the isor mitztarfim imaha isor. Aside from the moach, right? So, okay, good. That Ber Hetev was good. Let's read Sif Bet as Sif Bet in the Shulchan Aruch now. Since we didn't really, and I think just in interest of time, we're gonna read the Shulchan Aruch Bet Gimel Daled just as a review, and then we'll come back to some of the other Nosei Kelim if that's okay. So, someone want to read Bet for us in the Shulchan Aruch? We'll go Alish and then Jacob will give you Gimel.
Okay, I need to get there. I'm there. Okay. במה דברים אמורים שעצמות האיסור מצטרפים עם ההיתר. אוקיי. shall I go on? כשנפלה חתיכת נבלה לגדרה היתר כשהייתה חיה, אבל אם נתבשלה תחילה ואחר כך נפלה לגדרה היתר, עצמות שבה מצטרפים עם האיסור. לפי שבלעו מבשר הנבלה שנתבשלה לבדה. Okay, so what case we talked about, that all the above applies, that the atmoda isur mitzarfim im haeter. It's only in the case when the piece of nevela fell into the gdera when it was fresh, like
raw.
Raw, that's the word I was looking for. But if it was cooked, like in a different pot, itself, this nevela was cooked, so the bone absorbed the isur from the meat, and therefore the bones are adding up to the isur. Yeah, I reversed it, but that's basically
exactly. It. So, so right, that's an important point. If it's the I'm going to say fell in for the moment. We're going to next week get into the whole distinction that might be there. Perhaps if it falls in versus it's added in accidentally, right? Those might be different cases slightly. Right. If you would cook the bone with the meat beforehand, and then it fell in, then that bone has become isur at that point. And I think even if you said it was a kli, right? Well, then it's like even a kli isur, you have to be, you need 60 against it, right? So, okay, good. We're not going to do Nosei Kelim yet on this. Any thoughts or questions on that piece? Good. Jacob, you wanted to read next. Take Gimel for us.
Bishar isurim chutz basar v'chalav chaticha blua me'isor mitzarafet levatel ha'isor. For all other cases of isor, except for basar v'chalav, the piece that absorbs from the isor combines to invalidate the isor.
Exactly, right. So you drop some pork juice on your piece of beef, and then your piece of beef falls into your beef soup, let's say, or so. Well, I don't want to do mimino for the moment. Like falls into your soup, your vegetable soup. Then you can use that according to the Mechaber, right? You can use that piece of beef against the pork juice included with the soup, right? In order to get to 60. So, but what does the Rama say?
ואין נוהגים כן, כי קיימה להם בכל איסורים עתיכה זה נבלה, כדי I'll Simon Sadibet.
Right.
So we don't actually hold like this, or we don't act according to this logic, might be more accurate way of translating. Because we established in all Isurim a chaticha like is made nevela.
Yeah. Right. In other words, that piece of beef that pork juice fell on, the piece of kosher beef that pork juice fell on, that is now a nevela itself. The whole piece has a status of its own, like new isur. This, by the way, as Rav Landis pushed me in class, I think people heard it. Ve'eno aginken, we're not talking anymore about like, oh, it's yesh machmirim, but the car is like the Shulchan Aruch. No. This is the way Ashkenazim rule. But however, next week on Monday, people may have already seen this. We'll get some more subtlety in the Ramah about when does he actually think Hanan happens. It's not just simply like every case where there's where some isur falls into heter that the entire heter becomes asur. There are did you know in between, right? Was it done? How was it done, and so forth. That there are some subtleties. So. But general, and this is like, and I'll just drill this in again, as this is a Chazarah shir, this is like a big split to know, right? That Ashkenazim hold that Hanan falls, it works for everything, and Sfaradim, or at least the Shulchan Aruch, holds that Hanan only works in Basar B'Chalav. That opinion, by the way, that only works in Basar B'Chalav is a Tosafist opinion. It's not like he got that from the Sephardi world or anything like that. I remember correctly. I think it's Rabbeinu Ephraim against the Rabbeinu Tam and the Ri, and the Ramaz passing like Rabbeinu Tam and the Ri. I think that's right, but my memory could be wrong on that. So Yavni's thinking it through. We'll get there at some point, not today. Good. Let's do Dalet. Dalet is I think an important one, and we didn't spend too much time in it in class. So maybe I'll read if that's okay with people. Misharin berotev uva kippah, which what is the kippah? Perush hadakadak shel basar v'tavlin amita seth b'shulei hakadera. It's like the best way I can put it is like the grimy stuff when you finish all the soup, it's still like clinging to the sides of the walls. That stuff in there, the little pieces of whatever it is. Not that it's not edible; it's completely edible. It's just But Yavni, what was the word you just used?
I said delicious. It's delicious.
It is delicious, right? I mean, it's like the concentrated stuff. It's great. Uvachatichot, right? And all the pieces. So you've got the sauce, you've got the film, let's call it, the pieces. Umesharin hayater vayisur kemoshe balafaninu. And how do you measure them? It's what's in front of you now, right? Afal pisha ya beheter yoter mitchila v'nit ma'et bevishulo. Even though, right, originally your soup may have had a lot of soup, and some of it's now gone because of the bishul. A lot of subtlety there that happens about like, well, how is it gone? Is it gone because it burns off? Is it gone because it shrank, and so forth? But I'll leave the words on the chaver for the moment. V'nivla b'ketera, and here in particular, we're talking about it lost volume because the ketera absorbs some of it. But that's only in a min b'she'eno case, which of course, right, dioraita is about 1 in 60. Avalim hu min b'mino misharin gam b'masha ba'ah haketera, right? Ve'omed b'dofnei haketera u'musharin ze be'omad yafeh ve'ino toki ilu hu ba'ayin. All right. So in a min b'she'eno case, we don't take into account the previous size of the heter. But in the case of a min b'mino case, we do, right? Of course, min b'mino is batel barov deoraita, so maybe there's a little bit more room for leniency, and so we make a nice estimation of even the stuff that was absorbed into the walls of the soup. Aval mashikila ve'ibed, the kala ve'ibed. I can never remember which machmata or. Eino mitzaref shezek. It is kila, right? Kila.
Kala. I'm looking at the Al HaTorah, and they got nikud on that, so they.
So PL is not a real binyan anyway, so all good. So but anything that has actually been, this is I believe from the Rambam, if I originally right, anything that has essentially been burned off by by the fire, it depends but by the fire or the heat or the light doesn't combine with anything, right? Because that's gone, so we can't take that into account. So okay, that's the Shulchan Aruch. Any questions on that or anything that adjustments, corrections? Okay, I want to do a couple of Nosei Kalim if we can. Just looking at the time. One I really wanted to get to actually, so I want to maybe start with this. The Pitchei Tshuva Bet, when we say that we are Misharim Berotev, etc., etc. Someone want to read that? It's nice and short. Alana, please.
Okay. Barotev Ayin B'Tshuvat Beit Yaakov Sof Siman Nun Zayin Shekatav Dema She'oleh Hazei'ah Lemala Chaser Min HaMa'achal Uchshemasharim B'Shishim Tzarich L'Sha'er Ma Shechaser Ma Shechaser Al Yedei Hazei'ah Ayin Sham. So we're talking about like what evaporates from the pot?
Yeah, but I don't think it's completely evaporated. I think it's like what's still sitting up there on top of it, right? You see.
Okay, like on the like condensation on the lid of the pot.
Yeah, I don't even think necessarily that. I think he even means like the droplets that are above it that are floating upwards that are going to eventually be condensation on top of the pot, but are still like up there. So
okay.
He's like that you can count, right? But so when you get to 60, you need to also count that, right? What has been lost due to Zayah, which is like a pretty fascinating kula, I think, here, if I'm understanding correctly.
Okay. So, right, that's part of the heter, correct? Like all that stuff. Okay.
Yeah, that's the way I'm understanding it. Yavni, did you had
I have a question about this. Like this is from a tshuva, so this maybe should be a little bit more practical. But in general, like how are we imagining actually measuring such things, like to that precision?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this may come down a little bit to like what Alana was talking about of, if you're watching it cook and and there's a lid on the pot, so it's an enclosed system, right? Then you might be able to say, well, the whole volume is filled with steam or something like that, kind of thing. But maybe, I don't know. It's a great question. I just to let people know, I looked at the Beit Yaakov. The only version I could find of him was a very poorly printed and Xerox version in Hebrew books. It's at the end of a long tshuva. He seemed to be saying this, but I like some of the words I couldn't make out, and and it was late last night, and I was really tired, so I gave up. But trying to make out what the letters were and so forth. But yeah, if I get a chance, I will go back through it and try to figure out actually what his whole opinion is here. So
this whole thing where we're like measuring condensation, like having an enclosed pot system is great, but even with the enclosed pot, you can't really accurately measure that. So this flies in the face of like Rav Nachum's thing where people are actually measuring 60. Like there's no way you're actually measuring 60. Like it's impossible.
Great. Yeah, I'm starting to wonder about this as I'm going through this time of I think there is a school out there, which is like, it has to be a very good, measurement. You have to put things in, display certain things and figure out how big are they actually and all that. And I think there's another like line that's coming in here of like, yeah, and some things you estimate, right? You don't, although we'll see again next week. I mean, I'm stressing next week's class because I think it's just so important that there is really a sense that you're calling a chacham in for all of these cases, right? That's somebody who really knows what they're doing. So not me. But somebody really, really good who can kind of come up with all the answers here.
But that's also impossible. Like Lamont is saying, nobody is doing that 99% of the time, both because like that Hacham would never sleep, and also like, you would never eat, both because you would, I mean, I don't want to say never eat, but like.
Why? How often does like Issel fall in?
Exactly, it doesn't happen that often, I think.
That's true, but like you get so stressed by it. I don't know.
Yeah, I will say, I think in their world, it probably happened more because there was more Isur in their kitchen than we have on general, right? Most of us don't have to, salt and clean our meats anymore. Chalev is not something that we find with our meats. Generally, we don't have to remove it ourselves. So I think that already kind of really lowers the bar. So it's a much less likely scenario in our world, except for basar b'chalav, right? That's, I think, the most likely case in our world, is that you accidentally add milk to meat. And also I think in some points in their history, right, they really did have combined kitchens, like big ovens and so forth, that you were like communal, and so they were non-Jews sometimes using that kind of stuff as well. And but although, and to be fair, right, I have a lot of friends who have non-Jewish roommates or roommates who are less observant and do run into these cases all the time. But yeah, the other thing I think that I've been thinking about a lot is really, again, this pushes back to the original thing of, ideally you shouldn't be measuring, somebody should be tasting, right? That's really the ideal. And the fact that we have eliminated taste in our world in general makes this a very non-ideal system. So obviously there are going to be cases, right? If it's one drop in a huge pot, do you need to measure? I don't know. But if you actually added a piece of meat to like your soup, and you're like, oh my gosh, I added a piece of meat that I hadn't removed the chalev from, that's a different story, but yeah, that's the best I can come up with. I mean, but the truth is, I don't know how often in Yavni, how often are people dealing with these? I think, before Shabbos in like small towns, probably once upon a time, like everyone was coming running all the time. Like, I did this, I did that. And but I don't know for sure. All right, good. I want to end. We have 3 minutes. I want to do 2 things from the Ber Hetev, Sif Katan Vav and Sif Katan Zayin. Let's see if we can maybe do both, maybe just one of them. So maybe somebody want to read Ber Hetev Vav V'nit Ma'et. This is the case that the Shulchan Aruch talked about, that even though that we have less heter than we originally had, after cooking it, we measure what we have in front of us now. Somebody want to volunteer?
What?
Sorry, where did you say again?
It's in the Ber Hetev Sif Katan Vav V'nit Ma'et. Jacob, go for it.
Yeah. V'nit Ma'et Ktav Marshal Nira Afilu Hecha Serinus Nafal Ha'isor V'lo Nit Ma'et Basir
Echad.
Im HaHeter Afilu Hachi Ein L'Sayer V'ma Devala Hakdera Kain La'amod Al Soras HaDavar V'lo Yada Kama Bala Hakdera V'chama Pamim Yavo Kilkul Mizah
Elalam. Keep going.
Elalam Misarin Kmos Bela Nenu V'Ktav Hataz Lefiza Ein Lo Rot Heter V'ma Samar Shulchan Aruch V'Sif Zeh Misarin B'Omed Yafa V'Chulei.
Good. Now explain, maybe just to give us a general explanation. If you can. That's a hard thing to do sometimes, but
yeah, I think I could translate, but not really explain.
Good. Maybe I'll jump in just based on time, right? So he says,
yeah,
the Marshal says, wait a second, part of the assumption here is that both the Isur and the Heter kind of both decreased in size equally, right? Bashir Achad, right? But what if, right, that we saw that the Isur and the Heter didn't decrease equally? Like maybe the Heter, we lost a lot more Heter than Isur, right? But he says then you still that even in that case, you only do what's in front of you, right? And don't try to like base everything on the original amounts, right? Because you really don't know how much the Kedera absorbed. And you can actually end up with major problems because of that, because you're like, oh, I think there was more heter before, right? And you end up, permitting something that really should be forbidden, right? And he says, no, you should always do it based on what's in front of you. But he goes one step further. He's quoting the Taz here, right, which is very important. The Taz says that whole thing about in min b'mino, you should use a good estimation and even assume the stuff that was absorbed by the pot. Says, We don't do that, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
again, just like someone, I don't remember who said it, was like, well, wait, I thought we were supposed to measure very carefully. What's going on here, right? This is the Taz pushing back and saying, no, it has to be a good measurement. You can't just be like, oh, I think the pot absorbed this much heter, and we can use that. So you can see the pushback going on there. Okay, good. I'm gonna end there. If people want two other things that I would just recommend taking a look at, one is the Berhatev Zayin, and also the Chidushay Rabbi Akiva Eger, V'hanimile B'min B'Sheino Mino. I think are just two good things to look at in your own spare time. So, all right, I gotta go. But Chodesh Tov to everybody. Good Shabbos.
Okay, Chodesh Tov.
Good
Good Shabbos.